hello everyone and welcome to my guide for Ultra Nightmare. So I'm actually going to jump into my first run of the game. It's actually kind of funny because I've only uploaded the first episode of that and I've already gone and done so much afterwards. But the way I kind of envision this video going is I'm going to give you some general advice and then we're going to go into more specifics, talking about guns, runes, tokens and crystals, and then I plan on actually going through kind of each level with you and talking about a little bit of strategy. And which levels I consider to be hard and which ones I consider to be easier, because it's not kind of fluid where it's like, oh, it's really hard at the beginning because you don't have anything and then it gets easier. Some levels are harder than others in my personal opinion. So the way I decided to do my Ultra Nightmare run is I beat the game, so I did my stream of it, and then afterwards I was like, you know what, I'll just do the Nightmare run on my own. I talked a little bit about that during my stream, but I decided to do it on my own. I went through the first handful of levels and I was like, you know what, I'll try Ultra Nightmare just to see how far I get, and I died in the first level, and then I was like, okay, well, I just kind of sucked then, so maybe if I try it again, maybe I'll get farther. And the second time I tried, I actually got to the Doom Hunters, so, you know, significantly, you know, a decent of the way into the game, and I got through the first part of that boss battle, and then when you have to fight two of them, I just completely died. So I thought to myself, you know, if I had more practice beforehand with fighting that boss, I probably wouldn't have died in that instance. So that kind of leads me into my first topic for help. I would say the best advice I could give you for completing Ultra Nightmare is practice. And what I mean by that is having one game file be Nightmare and then another one be Ultra Nightmare, and practicing levels on Nightmare and then doing that level on Ultra Nightmare once you feel comfortable with doing it on Nightmare. So that means you do it multiple times in a row until you can do it without dying, and when you feel comfortable, maybe you do that a couple of times, you then go and do it on Ultra Nightmare and then progress. And then do that for the next level. The way I kind of went about doing that is I would do a level and I would do a battle, and if I felt I did pretty bad, I would just load the checkpoint, or I'd let myself die to redo that battle. And if I just, you know, felt like I needed to redo the level, I would get to the end of the mission and then just hit, you know, start and then reset mission. And I would just do that on repeat. And then I would see myself getting better and better. Because at the end of the day, I don't think it's skill that will get you through Ultra Nightmare. I think skill's part of it, but strategy is the main part of it. If you go into a battle and you know this enemy's here, and then after I beat these ones, these other enemies are going to spawn in. If you know that beforehand, the fight becomes a lot easier. You know what to expect. You kind of have a strategy on how to take them out. So I would say that strategy is more important than skill, and practice, obviously, like I mentioned before. So that's kind of the main tip I have for you guys, is to just go through the game slowly that way, by practicing on Nightmare and then going into Ultra Nightmare when you feel comfortable doing a level. And once you know it, you got to know it by heart at that point. You got to know each of those battles inside and out. And I think that's when you will be able to have a leg up on the enemies. You'll know where they're going to be. You'll know how to attack them the best, how to best fight that battle, because you've done it so many times. So that's the best advice and probably the most worthwhile advice I can give you. So now we're going to kind of go into some other combat tips and tricks, the kind of stuff that I chose to go through my run. And this is kind of subjective because you might prefer something that I don't, but this is the stuff I found was the best for me. I feel like I'm a relatively average gamer. I don't consider myself to be anything special in that regard, so if I can do it, you guys can do it. So let's go into guns first. Let's check the guns. So I'm just going to clarify, this is my first run of the game, so I haven't gone back and gotten everything on my Ultra Nightmare run. This is all filled out. Well, not all the challenges, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is from my first run, so don't give me crap that's not filled out. I haven't touched this a whole lot. But for me personally, with the combat shotgun, I prefer the sticky bombs. It's a pretty easy way to take out smaller enemies, and you don't have to be incredibly accurate with it. I actually find myself shooting at the ground more than at the enemy, just to get it in the area of where they are. Maybe I can chain together, you know, two enemies that are close, and if I just hit it in the middle, it'll take them both out. So I go with sticky bombs. The full auto is not bad. I actually want to test something because I have this thought that I had while I was playing, but I'm not sure if it's true, that the shotgun spread is more concise when you have... I want to see somewhere where we can see it. Okay, so that's the spread, and then let's see what... I mean, kinda. Well, maybe actually. I keep having this theory that this is more, I think it might go farther too. That one you can definitely tell. It's more concise. Okay, interesting. Sorry, I just wanted to verify that because I did that at one point. I was like, I feel like this is more pinpoint than just normal shooting. But, okay, back to guns. So that's the shotgun. Again, this is personal. What you find to be the best should work for you, and you'll kind of develop the strategy as you practice, and you'll figure out which one works best for you. But me personally, I prefer the sticky bombs. Sorry, wrong one. Now we're into the heavy cannon. I don't like the precision bolt, and the reason I don't is because I'm moving around so fast, and you have to keep moving, that I find it hard to aim. The only time I really used it was when you're fighting the con maker, because it's very easy to get headshots, and it insta-kills the smaller people that you need to get ammo, but we'll talk about her separately. I would go with the micro missiles because it helps early on when you're taking on Hell Knights, you're taking on Arachnotrons. Those are really good for those enemies, and you'll probably die the most in the beginning stages. Well, I shouldn't say that. I died probably the most on the first stage when I was just learning, because it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have as much stuff, and you're basically made out of glass until you get the flamethrower, and then you can actually start fending for yourself a little bit. But okay, moving on. Plasma rifle. It's funny because when I streamed this game, the first one I got was the microwave beam because it seemed interesting instead of the heat blast, and I regret doing that because the heat blast is by far better. The nice thing about it is, it has that wide spread, and it will falter a lot of enemies when you use it. And it's just an attack that builds up over time, so you can choose when to use it. So sometimes I'll have it built up and then choose when to use it. Like have it charge up and then go to a larger enemy and hit it. But I would avoid the microwave beam because you kind of have to stand still with one enemy to get it. So I don't consider it a worthwhile thing to use, so go for the heat blast. Now this one is obvious because I haven't unlocked it. I would say that if you are not using the lock-on burst, you're doing Ultra Nightmare wrong, because the lock-on burst will take care of most large enemies in just one attack. Hell Knights, Arachnotrons, Revenants. The Mancubus takes one lock-on and then one more rocket, but I would say that the benefit of having a lock-on round is way better than the remote detonate. I can't even think of any situation where the remote detonate would be beneficial. Maybe against the con maker if you miss. I don't know. But even if you're fighting the con maker, the lock-on would be better. I don't know. I don't see the benefit of using the remote detonate. If someone wants to comment on what the use of that is, they can go for it. I think that's the better option. There's really nothing to be said about the super shotgun. It's kind of obvious. Funny thing is, I actually use this a lot more than I did in Doom 2016. Yeah, I just hated the idea of using more than one shell, per shot. But it's definitely something you need, and it's really powerful against, higher up demons than I thought it was. So if you turn a corner and you run into a Mancubus, you can at least falter it. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button to do that. The ballista, I'm going to leave this one up to you guys, because the only time I really use the ballista is to just shoot it normally. I had this one equipped. I'd never really used the destroyer blade because it took so long to charge up. Most of mine I like using for stuff I can do on the go, which is why I kind of like the grenade launcher on the shotguns, because I can do that while I'm in the air. But I didn't really use the mods on this gun. It might be better for it's showing it used against a Cacodemon, and I never use this gun against a Cacodemon. I would only use it against a Pain Elemental, or I guess a Mancubus. I've used it a couple times just because you could be fighting a Pain Elemental and there'd be a Mancubus and you just don't switch your gun. But it's really up to you what you want. The reason I don't use the Destroyer Blade is because it takes too long, and in Ultra Nightmare you need to be on the move constantly. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit too long on this. The chain gun, I use the mobile turret. I don't use the energy shield because I actually mess it up a lot. This is just personal preference because I'll hit the energy shield and I'll only keep it up for like a second to block a single attack, and then I have to let it charge up after I let go of it. So I just decided I'll use the mobile turret, which I use for when if I know a Hell Knight is going to spawn, I'll just sit there with my mobile turret, scoot up until he spawns, and then blast him until he's gone. So I like using this more. It was helpful against the Icon of Sin. But that's really it for weapons. There's still a lot of personal choice. When it comes to the suit, I do have a specific way that I like doing this. Well, if you go check out my other one, this is all full. As you can tell, I didn't like the ice bomb in this run, but then I started to gain an appreciation for it, which we'll talk about a little bit here after. Well, I guess we can talk about it now. Since we're here, you should be okay with using the ice bomb. I know that I saw this one tweet where a guy was like, is there a way that we can not use the ice bomb? And they're like, well, you're in charge of the buttons you push, but you should use the ice bomb. Yeah, freeze it with the ice bomb. Also, if you have not looked at these, you have to. Like, knowing this stuff is life-saving. Like, knowing you can blood punch a pinky to just get rid of it, that is life-saving information for an Ultra Nightmare run. So if you haven't looked at this, you really should. So the order that I like to do these is start with fundamentals. Early on, you're going to want to be able to be fast because you don't want to be climbing up something and get hit. So I usually go with the faster ledge grab first, and then what I like to do after is save up for the dash fills more quickly. And the reason behind that is because I feel like if you don't have that, the chances of you dying early on are significantly higher, and then you want this one because movement is key. So get that one, then this one, and then me personally, I actually come up here to environment and take care of explosive barrels because I don't want to worry about me blowing myself up by accident, which you can still do with the rocket launcher even after this. So just being careful here. So I would say focus on getting the fundamentals, at least those two fundamentals first, and then it starts to be personal preference. What I do after getting the thicker skin is I come over the frag grenade and I start doing these. The reason being is because the frag grenade is a fantastic weapon, and you should use it every chance you get. Every time it's refilled, throw it at an enemy. It is just free explosions that will greatly help you. So what I do is I'll try to go for the one that does 2, and then I start getting the effects. Ice Bomb's pretty good. This is it's the second to last thing you upgrade. You don't use it as often, but it's still useful. Like, I know specific situations where I'm like, okay, there's going to be a whiplash here, I'm going to freeze it, and then go. I also like using it in smaller arenas because when you start feeling crowded, it's very nice to throw that and then get out. So there is benefits to this weapon, so don't just ignore it. And I know a lot of people do ignore it, so don't do that. My personal advice, you should be practiced enough with all of the levels that you do not need a single one of these. So don't bother upgrading these until you just have extra ones, which you probably will by the end of the game. So do a combination of fundamentals, environment, then start working on what you use the most, and I use the frag grenade often, and I would suggest you guys do that as well. Alright, moving on to runes. This is again personal preference. Me personally, there's only one that I know for a fact you should have, which is this one, because it's just so useful. It has so many different uses. So if you see the distance, you can close a gap super quick, and that's really useful when you're fighting things like a Baron of Hell, where their glory kill range only lasts for like 5 seconds, so you need to act fast. It's actually useful for platforming as well. I use this perk a lot of, like, I'll hit somebody that's up somewhere, and if I'm mid-air, I'll just do it so I shoot onto the place that they're at, or if I'm down low and I hit someone that's up there and then they're in that range, I can maybe throw a grenade and then zoop up to them to take them out. I would suggest changing these up though for certain situations. For example, this one is good for bosses. I wouldn't suggest using this in levels, and I know there's probably a lot of people that disagree with me on that one, but I wouldn't use this for levels because it recharges on death. So I would suggest having stuff that will last longer than that, because you don't want to die. But it is useful when you're doing something like a boss. because it's very easy to die fighting bosses. And then this is one I always like having. I just like the freedom it gives with moving in the air. But again, this comes down to personal preference. I wouldn't worry about performing glory kills faster. This is something someone talked about a little bit, saying, oh, I use this in Ultra Nightmare because then I can go faster. Well, most of the time the demons will just stand around and look at you while you do it, and then you'll have time to move right after. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Speed boost after performing a glory kill. I actually don't like using... they changed the name. It's not haste anymore. It's overdrive, right? Because you lose control by how fast you're going. So I actually would suggest not getting this one. This one could be useful, but if you're just on top of it, especially if you have this one, I wouldn't worry about it. This could be useful. I do like this one just because it gives you extra health. This one could be useful. I've actually heard a lot of people use this one as well, but this is all personal preference. So when you're practicing, try different runes, see what you like and what you don't like. This is what I like and what I prefer to have. So that actually covers my setup for how I like to customize the Slayer for that. So we're going to go, as just a last little bit, we're going to go and talk about specific levels and where I rank them in difficulty. Actually, you know what? Psych. I forgot to talk about... Actually, I don't think you can look at it from here. Can you? I don't think you can. That's why I glanced over it. When you're getting the crystals, there's a specific way I like to do it. Health and armor come before ammo. And the first one you should do is the flamethrower one that makes it charge up. I think it's the first one, so top left. So that'll be the first one you want to upgrade because you need to use your flamethrower very often. And I will admit, especially if you go and watch my original stream that I'm currently uploading, I will constantly say, oh, I need to use the flamethrower more. I forgot to use the flamethrower. I need to use it more. You have to get over that forgetfulness of using this. You need to be using it all the time. And I think it's more helpful when you're in Nightmare and you're not, you don't have all this health that you have. Enemies aren't as strong, but when you're doing it in Nightmare, you quickly realize why you need the flamethrower. And I'm not very good at using it just in the battle. What I will actually do with it is I will get an enemy into a glory kill state, and then I will go and use the flamethrower and then do the glory kill. That way you can just get, I think it's like 20 armor each time. It's like 20 to 22. So if you're not used to using the flamethrower, just get in the habit of doing the flamethrower right before you do a glory kill. It's free health. It's free extra health because you'll get health from doing that. Oh, and not just the glory kill, but do it for the chainsaw as well. So anytime you're about to kill an enemy, light them on fire first. When it comes to crystals, just go for health and armor first, and then if you feel like you're running low on ammo all the time, which I mean you will, but you should also be chainsawing all the time as well. If you feel like you need a little bit more, go ahead and start doing that, but do it when you feel comfortable. Again, I don't have a specific time. I say, oh, when you get to this one, then do it. Just when you feel comfortable, but I would say do health and armor first until you feel comfortable starting to upgrade that. Again, that comes down to personal preference. And as you're practicing in Nightmare, you'll realize when's a good time to do that as well. So that's, again, personal preference. But let's go ahead and talk about the missions. Okay, so now you get to see all the stuff I missed on my original run. Hell on Earth, it's rough, and I feel like a lot of people give up after trying this level because it is difficult. It requires you to play the game differently. You don't have the flamethrower. You don't have grenades until about most of the way through the level. Actually, probably about halfway through the level. It's difficult, but after you do it enough times, you'll get the gist of how to do it. There's really only two battles that are hard, and one's when you're in that mall area after you climb up, and then the last little bit is a little tricky, but not if you're careful. Really, the arachnotrons are the problem, but if you can take them, then you're fine. This mission isn't as hard as you think it is. You get better at it over time. It kind of weans out the people that kind of give up easy, so just get used to dying here because you will your first couple times through, but overall not too bad. Exaltia. I've done this mission so many times that I know it like the back of my hand. So it's funny because I went through it on my original stream and I missed the Slayer Gate, and then I went and redid the mission off camera, and I didn't pick up the key, which means I beat the Slayer Gate and I just zoomed past it instead of picking it up. I think I even just zoomed out of there before the thing blew up or whatever, but I didn't get the key, so I had to do it a third time. And then I've just done this mission plenty of times trying to get all the different stuff for it. So I've done this mission a lot. I don't consider this one to be a very hard mission. I do consider it to be a pretty long mission, but it's not too bad. Most of the time, the only fight that kind of gives me trouble is there's one where you are looking down and there's an Arachnotron and then a Revenant just kind of hanging out down there. That's the only battle that gave me a little bit of problems. I do want to interject real quick and say that if there is a battle that you can see from a distance, there is no reason why you have to go there immediately. What I mean by that is if you have a rocket launcher and you can see the enemy, there's nothing stopping you from taking out a couple of enemies before even getting to that area. This is useful on Final Sin. Well, actually, there's plenty of them throughout the game that'll have fights going on when you get there. There's actually one that I think of. Use the distance in the map to your advantage. Another quick thing is when you get to the Super Gore Nest. So there's the first fight, which is in that big open area at the beginning, and then you go inside, and then there's a smaller area with a thing that keeps smashing itself, and you fight an Arachnotron. That's where you're introduced to the Dread Knight. And the strategy I used for that fight, which ties into what I'm talking about, is that hallway that leads to there never gets blocked off. So you can go in there, start the battle, an Arachnotron comes through the wall, and then you can hop back in that hallway where actually a second Dread Knight will spawn, and just let them funnel through the small entryway and take them out. So as you practice, look for these areas that you can use to your advantage that puts your enemy at a disadvantage. Like I said, funneling them through this little area where I can just lob rockets and I don't have to go into this small confined area and try to do a fight. So Exaltia is not that bad. The Cultist base, I consider to be, it's kind of average. This is kind of where you're really testing yourself to see if you know what you're doing, because you get a lot of enemies, a lot of, this is where you're introduced to the Mancubus, so that's where you kind of have to learn how to deal with them, because they are a powerhouse, especially since you're doing this earlier on and you don't have as much health and stuff like that. You have to get used to them. You also get the rocket launcher here, so you actually get a big help in combat. Basically, once you get the rocket launcher, your ability to fight the enemies gets a lot easier. Speaking of which, kind of what I touched on earlier about fighting enemies from a distance, the one fight that I struggled with was the fight with the... it's right, so you pick up the rocket launcher and then you go into an area to fight, and what I found to work out the best with that battle is once you pick up the rocket launcher, you stay in this little corner where the rocket launcher was, and you can actually peek out and see a Mancubus up on a higher podium, and you can take him out immediately. And then you can go out, turn, and there's another Mancubus, so you can throw a frag grenade and then start lobbing rockets at him. And you've already then, once you do that, take out 2 of the 3 Mancubuses that are Mancubi, 3 of the enemies that are there, and then you just have to deal with I think it's gargoyles and imps that are the rest of that. I think a Cacodemon spawns in near that podium as well. Yeah, it does, because as soon as you start the battle, you can go over there and it pops up. But this level isn't super difficult. There is that one area, which is depicted in this picture here. That battle's not too bad, because it gives you a lot of space. You can go through a lot of different stuff. Doom Hunter base is not... Actually, I consider this to be a relatively easy level until you get to the Doom Hunters themselves. And again, they just take practice. So if you're doing it, I would suggest doing it until you almost kill them and try to reload a checkpoint or let them kill you, just so you can get practice in with those enemies without having to redo the entire level. Not a whole lot to be said there. And also, you'll notice that I'm missing some stuff here. You should not be missing anything when you go through this. You need to know these levels inside and out. In fact, if you were to close your eyes and go through the level mentally, you should be able to tell me where you're going, where upgrades are in conjunction with where you're going. You need to know them very, very well. Super Gore Nest is not difficult. I can't actually think of any part in there that's actually super difficult to overcome. Any of the battles that are in there, either, like I mentioned before, there's that hallway where you can funnel them through, or it's a big enough arena that you can be so far away from everybody that you can pick and choose your targets. Not a hard level. If I was to actually rate these in difficulty, I would say it's harder at the beginning, then in the middle it's easier, and then at the end it gets harder again. So, where are we? Arc Complex. I also don't consider this level to be very hard either. I would put it on the same difficulty as the Super Gore Nest. Not a big problem. You guys should be able to handle that just fine. Going back now to... This is where you're introduced to the Marauder. And if you have trouble with the Marauder, just practice him. He's not that bad. Honestly, 2 weapons you should use on him is the Super Shotgun and the Ballista. Both are great weapons to use against him. Which I tend to do is I'll use the Super Shotgun until I run out of ammo. If you have full ammo, you should probably be able to take him out without having to switch over. But if just on the chance that if you don't have enough ammo for it, you can switch over to the Ballista and do just fine. Or vice versa, whatever you like doing better. Both of them you can hit him twice before he gets his shield back up. I was confused in my original run if I was actually doing damage to that second shot or if it was just the first shot. You do damage on both of them. So what I originally thought was wrong, I've since learned and corrected since then. Mars Core isn't too bad, obviously where you get the BFG. This is where you start to learn what fights you should use the BFG on. And I actually should have talked about this when I talked about the weapons, but if the battle itself gives you a BFG core, you're meant to use it. I'm actually trying to think if there's any that I didn't use it on, and I can't think of any. I'm pretty sure each time it gave me one, I used it. And as you practice those battles, you'll learn the best time to use it. For example, the end of this mission, you fight 2 Doom Hunters, and it gives you a BFG round, and I tend to use it right there at the end when they show up because it can take them out of their vehicles and them floating around, and then that's just easy. You lock onto them and hit them a couple times and they're done. But, like I was saying, you learn when's the best time to use the BFG, and you'll start learning that especially when you do the fights in Final Sin. Sentinel Prime. I thought this was going to be a lot easier than it was. Turns out I was wrong. I thought that I would do fine against the Gladiator, and the Gladiator's harder than I thought. I spent a long time practicing him, and this almost ended my run. I was worried about fighting him, and he almost killed me, and that would have made me very upset because that's like just a little bit more than halfway through the game. Well, actually, I consider these other missions to be relatively short, except for Urdak. Urdak feels like a long one. But I would say definitely practice him a lot and redo the battle a lot. Just reload that checkpoint as much as you can to just get the practice in with it. He gets easier as you practice, but even then, it's very easy to mess up, and if you mess up on Nightmare, it's over. So I would say this is one you have to practice a lot, because it's very easy to screw up, and then you're done, and you're going to be upset with yourself because you've spent all these hours getting to this point, all this stress for it just to crumble. And to be honest, you kind of have to be ready for that. It will happen. You will get far, and then you'll lose, and then you'll feel bad. But I have some advice for that, which I'll get into later. Taurus Nabad isn't too bad. I got something right in my eye. The only fight that's kind of difficult is the one that has the Marauder. It's right after you get your Crucible. Well, when you pull the hilt out of the Titan. It's the fight right up there, and my strategy for it is, so they give you that little area that has the stairs and then the platform. I would say, you don't have to stay there. You don't. This is the same conversation I had with the hallway, is you can go from there and go down into that big area that's got like water and stuff, you can hang down there and it spreads the enemies out really nicely. And since the Marauder's really fast, he will come down first and he'll get to you, and you can do a couple of shots, and then you can go back up and make him climb back up. You can spread them out really nicely. I usually try to deal with the Marauder last, just because he needs my focus to do it, and I'd rather not be fighting him and then I get slapped by a Revenant and then I die because of it. So I would save him for last. Just keep moving and he's no problem. These two hell levels I'll just kind of review together. Like I said, this one's not too bad. It's just the ending with the two Doom Hunters that you'll have to fight. That's the only part that I would consider to be super bad. And then the part 2 of it is not super bad as well. Again, once you get practice in, what you think is hard starts to become easier and easier to manage. So just practice these levels. They're not as bad as they seem. They can be intimidating, but it's not that bad. Don't worry. So Urdak isn't too bad. It's got a Doom Hunter pretty early on, and then a Marauder later on. Not too bad, especially the Marauder fight. The Marauder fight's pretty easy to do, because you can just lure him out and then fight him by himself. No problem there. The main thing you need to practice on this level is the Con Maker. She is a really tough boss. But again, this is where skill and strategy come into play. Because you can be a really good player and you can just take her out with rockets and you're getting headshots, getting your ammo back, and you're doing it fast. Or you can be like me and not be like perfect at getting headshots, but you can manage to get maybe a couple, but you're not perfect at it. And that's where I kind of fall in. My strategy for taking on the Con Maker, since as you slowly take down the little notches of health, she'll make the area damage you. So what I would do is when the battle starts, and this is what I practiced, is I would use weapons that could damage her, but I wouldn't use later on, because the weapons I'm using will take it down slower than the other weapons that I'm using. So for example, you can use your shotgun grenades and take her health down at a decent pace, which I would do right off the bat. And then I would do that, she'd make a portion of the area bad and hurt you, and then I would switch to a different weapon and try to do that. I tried a handful of different things, but I would try to switch to a different weapon each time that I took down one of her little pieces of health, which worked pretty well. And in fact, at the end, I had a BFG round, and I knew that the Final Sin would give me BFG rounds for the fights that I would need them. And I had plenty of Crucible swings, so I figured, hey, I'll use one during this boss. And I would not suggest using the BFG on But yeah, I would really only use the BFG against her as a boss, because so you don't want to do it against the Gladiator. I just don't think it's effective. But I would do it against her. But you have to be very careful, because it is very easy to miss, because she moves and the BFG is really slow. And what you want to do is hit her with it. You don't want to. If you miss, it's a wasted shot. But if you hit her, it drains all of it. So if you have a BFG round, you can take the risk. What I personally did was I waited till it was the last one, and then I waited for her to move, and then I did it when I knew I could get that shot. And that's how I took her out. Took down the last little thing of her health, because that's the most stressful moment. That's where you probably will die. That's the only thing that's really worrisome about doing Urdak. Final Sin. This level is just stressful in its own, because you know you've come so far, and you know if you lose that you have the entire game to go through again. All the pain and the stress you'll have to do again. So just by itself, this is a very stressful level, but it's doable. Like I mentioned before, there's plenty of times where you can see the battle going on in another building, and you can hang out and maybe take out a Mancubus or something. This is where you need to be careful and portion out when you're going to be using your super weapons. This comes down to strategy, like I was talking again about. So you know that there's going to be an Archvile That'll summon some enemies, and you should know that you're either going to shoot it with a BFG round. And I really don't like using the BFG directly at one enemy that I want to kill, because it might not kill it. Like for example, I don't think a direct shot with the BFG will kill a Tyrant. But if you use the Crucible against a Tyrant or an Archvile, obviously an insta-kill, so that's where I like to use that. And then there's a couple of fights where it gives you BFG ammo. But again, it comes down to practice. If you practice it and you know, okay, I have this amount of ammo when I get to this point, and I can use this super weapon here, and then use this super weapon here, and that'll make the fights a lot easier. It just comes down to practice and figuring out when you want to use these weapons. This level isn't super bad, especially if you have the strategy for each one of these little battles. You know that when you go into the first part of it, if you have a BFG round left over, there's definitely a better time to use it than not. I consider the hardest part of this level is the first fight, just because it never ends. I don't even think the Marauders in this one are all that hard. The first Marauder you fight in this level is a little bit more annoying because it's a smaller area. It's just a square. It's not too bad. And then when you fight them the second time, there's plenty of areas you can go to spread them out. But the main thing I want to talk about in regards to this level is the Icon of Sin. And Icon of Sin is rough because you can be doing really well and then you can die really fast. So if you aren't paying attention for like a second, you can just get slapped by the Icon of Sin and be done. I consider the first part of that fight to be harder because you can have enemies on different levels and not know they're there until you jump down there, and then all of a sudden you have a Mancubus in front of you. The second part, since it's a bigger area and you can see everything so much easier, it's a lot easier. But yeah, pay attention to where the Icon of Sin moves to, because you want to always, obviously you want to keep that in mind, but you want to make sure you don't get slapped by him by accident. And that's the only thing that makes the fight really hard, is just making sure you are paying attention to him more than the smaller enemies, because you can be doing really well, and I experienced this when I was practicing, is like you can do really, really well, and then you can just not be ready for an attack. Like you can be in the wrong spot and you see him wind up and you don't get out of the way in time. Just pay attention to what he does, because he can take your health out really fast. But overall, it's not too bad. The enemies that are constantly coming in, just take him out with the Crucible. Don't bother with anything else. Flamethrower, slice him, and then move on. And some tips for him is the BFG round will take off a piece of his armor. So I would suggest doing that. Something effective to do, since he's up there and he's got his hands on two structures. If you do one, so let's say you just shoot him with the BFG and it takes off one of his chest plates, he'll do an animation where it blows off of him, and then you can go, and then he'll put his hands back. So you can move in that time to where he puts his hands back and take out one of his hands. And I consider the hand and forearm portion to be the hardest, because it almost seems like when he's in his second form that when those are the only thing left, he'll just do the fire out of his forehead. And when he does that, he puts his hands down, so it gets really hard to shoot at them. But beyond that, I would just use the chain gun. That's the best weapon for just grinding the health off of him. But that's really it for him. At the end of the day, this isn't a super easy thing to do, in that you'll probably die a lot, and you need to be ready for that. Quite frankly, it's going to be very easy for you to get cocky halfway through the game and go, oh, I've gotten this far, nothing can kill me, and then a pinky slams you out of nowhere and you die, and you lose hours of progress. You just got to be ready for that, which is why I advise going slow. I didn't experience a whole lot of heartache because of that, because I took the time to go slow, which is why that first principle I talked about is so important. And, you know, the game can be random at times. You can get cornered, or you can get hit by a gargoyle's acid spit out of nowhere, and that'll happen. And when it does, you just have to be ready to say, okay, let's go again. You need to be ready for that, because it will happen. But I do think that's the end of the advice that I have. It's a major payoff if you do. You just feel great. Like, I took a victory lap when I saw the cutscene for the Icon of Sin. When I beat him, I was like, holy crap, it's done. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to stress about it. I mean, to be totally honest with you guys, I did this I did this during the COVID-19 quarantine, so I've had a lot of time to just buckle down and spend time practicing. I was able to do this over the course of a bit over a week. So to put the time frame in perspective for you guys, the game came out at the end of March. Was it March 20th or 22nd? The game came out. I played it immediately, started streaming it. I moved back home due to the quarantine. Now doing classes online, so I've had just a lot of time here to do streaming since I can't go out and see friends and stuff like that. I've just had time to do this, so this is what I decided to devote my time to. And for those that follow my channel, you'll probably realize that I haven't put anything out on my channel very much, just besides the occasional meme, because I've been so focused on doing this. And I was able to accomplish this in, well, let's see, so it came out on the 20th or 22nd, I can't remember, and then I moved, and then I just wrapped up my gameplay in like 2 gameplay sessions, I think, maybe 2 or 3, and I beat it on the 14th of this month, April. So, you know, a little under a month of playing the game pretty consistently. So this has really been the only thing I've been playing. But, you know, if I'm able to beat it that fast practicing the levels, I think you can too. Obviously my circumstance is a little bit different than maybe your guys's, because I'm not an essential worker, so I'm just here being a college student at my home where I have lots of time to do this. If you don't have as much time, obviously it'll be different for you, but that's just why I was able to accomplish it in that time. It's just because I had so much time and I decided to devote it towards this. And I don't think I'm an amazing player. I think I'm pretty average, but I think you can do it if I can do it. So I give you all the encouragement that whoever you are, no matter your schedule, you can put in time to practice levels and make slow progress through an Ultra Nightmare run. And if it goes south and you die partway through the game, just, you know, put your chin up and go for it. Do it again. You're better this time around. But just a small piece of advice. I would say that you go and just do a dry run right off the bat, see how far you get. And then after that, that's where you start practicing. It's just figure out where you died, and then you can start practicing the levels after that. But that's all the advice that I have for you guys. If you have any other questions that I haven't answered in this video, please leave me a comment, and I'll do my best to address that. Since I'm a relatively small YouTuber, I should be able to answer your questions fine. If I see them, I'll do my best to be active in checking those. If you've already completed Ultra Nightmare, what were some other tips that you had? Go ahead and leave a comment below and share this with your friends if they're struggling as well. I wish you the best of luck on your Ultra Nightmare run. I do believe it's within your capability to do. You can do it. I give you my entire amount of encouragement that I can muster. You have it within you to complete it. But in the meantime, you guys can hit me up on my social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is the best way to reach out to me. Leave a comment below. I do want to answer your questions. If I miss something that you guys want answered, go ahead and leave a comment. But yeah, that really wraps it up for me for this one, guys. Best of luck. I'll see you guys in the next one.